Please listen carefully.
Mandy is written and directed by Panos Cosmatos. It was screened at the 2018 Fantasia Film Festival, and it stars the man, the myth, the legend, the internet meme machine that is Nicolas Cage. If you just break it down in terms of plot, Mandy is a pretty standard revenge film, but it's made super interesting by the way it's told in a sort of LSD-infused nightmare. The best way to describe the film would be to imagine the director dropping a bunch of acid and proceeding to look at a heavy metal album cover for several hours, while deciding to turn that into a film complete with Ralph Bakshi-esque dream sequences, and turning it into a violent exploitation Nick Cage revenge film. Now, I hadn't, and I still haven't seen the director's previous film, Beyond the Black Rainbow, and my main fear going into it was that it would be visually beautiful, yes, but that it would take itself extremely seriously. Something a la Only God Forgives, where you can clearly picture the director jerking himself off behind the monitor while watching every shot. And I'm very happy to report that the film is not that. Even if it does have some darker and some bleaker moments, it fully understands that at its core it is a Nick Cage exploitation film, or Cagesploitation if you will, and it utilizes the Cagemeister perfectly to his strengths. The first part of the film is very slow and meditative, and almost lulls the spectator into a false sense of security, testing your patience, but with little outrageous moments that signify to the audience of what's to come. And then comes the second act, where Cage channels his inner demons, and the film becomes full-on gory exploitation schlock, and it is absolutely glorious. And this film will provide the internet with GIFs for decades, utilized by millions of teenagers who have never ever seen a Nick Cage film, or at least not a lot, but oh my god, isn't he just hilarious in those YouTube compilations?
Well, vive la fucking France, man!
The director Panos Cosmatos certainly has a distinct and bold visual style. He loves his deep, rich primary colors to an almost psychedelic extent, where, for example, you'll have entire prolonged sequences that will just be red. And even in more traditionally lit sequences, they're not so much teal and orange as you could expect from a lot of modern action films or modern blockbuster films, as they are green and gold, making the daylight sequences in particular look putrid and sickly. It has this almost morbid beauty to it, if that makes any sense. The film's very clearly shot on digital, and one thing that I didn't appreciate was the amount of film grain that was overlaid on top of the image. Now, I love film grain, I really do, but this is very clearly a grain scan that you overlay on top of the film, and I found it extremely distracting because, honestly, I probably have the same cheap plugin. I understand that the director wanted it to look like film because that's certainly the type of cinema and the era of cinema that he's trying to evoke, which is somewhere between Ken Russell and Alejandro Jodorowsky. And I will actually steal a joke that I thought was very funny on Letterboxd of somebody describing this film as Alejandro Jodorowsky's Ghost Rider, which I thought was very fitting. Now, I get that the director probably didn't have the funds to actually shoot the film on 35mm, but this is still a pretty cheap effect, and there are ways to emulate film that are far superior. One being the use of an Arri laser, which is basically a scanner that takes your digital file and transforms it into a 35mm print. Although, in the Q&A, the director admitted that they had destroyed the lighting budget about halfway through the film, so I imagine that really wasn't an option. And I ramble on about this little nitpick because the film is so evocative in its imagery and in its use of color that I feel this cheap effect sort of lessens the impact, and in my opinion the film would have been better served with just the clean, crisp digital image. Mandy was still, however, one of the best films that was screened at the 2018 Fantasia Film Festival, and made me extremely curious to go back and check his previous film, Beyond the Black Rainbow, as well as whatever the director does next. So as always, thanks very much for watching the video. Be sure to hit the like button if you like the review. Please consider subscribing, and until next time, see ya.